Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my co-host. We've been doing this now for 20 years. We're excited about this being our 20th year, bringing tools, tips to you to perform in your best. And if you can grab a few things that we end up focusing on that you can bring to your team, you can bring to yourself, that's what we're looking for. And so we always talk about emotional intelligence because that's one of the keys. 92% of leaders have high emotional intelligence. We're also in an emotional recession now, meaning that some of the scores, your emotional intelligence and optimism has gone down about 5% over the years. So we're zeroing in on that. And Dr. Kathy Greenberg and I are zeroing in on helping you. We're going to talk briefly about a couple things that we have coming up. But today, are you be wise? Be wise. You're going to learn some leadership lessons from inside the busy beehive. So we're going to have a lot of metaphors today about bees. And Phillip Atkinson has a book called Be Wise, and he's done a really nice job about what can we learn from bees. And we're going to ask him about that, and he's going to highlight some of the tips from his book. So just before we bring him on, uh, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, how are you today?
I'm doing okay, and I apologize to our beautiful audience for not being able to see all of you and not having you see me today. Unfortunately, I'm just going to be in my beautiful voice today, and I'm very excited, I have to say, about today's show. I'm working on this new book, Global Leadership Future Proof, which is a 25th anniversary edition of a book that I did way back a long time ago with Marshall Goldsmith and some other friends. And I'm really excited to hear from Phillip today because we're going to talk about the importance of the queen bee. I'm going to pause on that one for a second. I want to
That's
say
you.
the
That's
queen
you.
bee. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. We'll come back to that. But I'm also giving a shout out here to everybody in the audience. If you are feeling overwhelmed or burned out or want to just make better decisions in the moment, and you feel just really truly baked. I mean, I was really thinking there about just how I feel so baked sometimes. I
Yeah.
think tomorrow is going to be a super, super opportunity for people to join you, Relly, on your special webinar podcast. Maybe you can talk a little bit
Yeah.
about
We love emotional intelligence. I always say if you're on autopilot, if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. You only got to do a few things to be exceptional to master the moment. Well, what do you do in those few things? And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about these leadership keys that I have. When you're in the gap, what do you do in the gap? How do you delegate? How do you give feedback? How do you coach? And then some of those I'm going to highlight have an AI bot related to it. So I'm excited to share that. And I know, Kathy, you have something coming up with our dear friend, Dr. Zaina Gusab, and that's what later this week, right?
Yep, we're going to talk about the importance of understanding emotional intelligence assessments, and in particular, our, I guess, our passion for the EQI 2.0. And we're going to be teaching a class June 3, 4, and 5. And we invite everybody to participate with us. But right now, I'm really happy that we're going to be talking to somebody who is an expert on being wise by learning from bees and the 12 leadership lessons from a busy
Yes.
beehive. Yay.
And I'm going to introduce Philip Atkinson. He is a leadership and team expert, an organizational coach, and he shares the wisdom of his two great passions. Now, what are they? They're in his book, Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from the Beehive. He's a beekeeper. He lives in Alsace. I don't know if I said that right, Alsace, France, and loves spending summers tending to and observing the precious bees, spending the winter learning, reading, and writing about them throughout the year. He supports leadership teams and leaders to grow and develop. He's the founder of Hive, HIVIE dash logic.com, coaching and communication. Go to his website. It's really nicely done. He's got a lot of information and resources there. And the company runs collaborative beehive supporting senior leaders and teams at a multinational organizations or with multinational organizations to perform at their best through coaching and training. All the proceeds of the book go to Bees for Development Organization. And Philip, before we jump in with you, I told you we have three beehives. My wife is tending that. She's not necessarily an expert yet. And just yesterday, she's like, I can't believe I got stung. And so she's walking around with a big red mark on her neck. So, Philip, welcome.
Nelly, really, thank you. It's lovely to be here. And hello, Kathy. I'm feeling amongst global friends already. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. It's fascinating to me, and I hope the audience gets a little bit of the essence today of maybe a visit to hidden brain. And of course, we love our friends over there. One of the things that just strikes me, Philip, is you seem to have a lot of different influences
Hmm.
on your life's work. And I know that you're very passionate about what you do, but tell us a little bit about how you got to be who you are and who helped you get there.
What a lovely open question, Kathy. Thank you. Um, I well, here we are. You lots of different influences. Life, and all its beautiful roller coaster, up and down, sideways, shapes us, doesn't it? And my prime career was working inside large organizations. I was a team leader and a functional head and a department head in organizations like Reckitt Benckiser and Sanofi, the drug company, and
Oh
Novartis, the
yeah,
drug company,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Roche, the world's largest maker of, and Genentech, the world's largest maker of cancer treatments.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah.
And I was a team leader in all of those organizations. And I just became fascinated, not only in what we did, but how we worked. And why were some teams, you might get two teams in one organization, two teams, same meeting rooms, same resources, same biscuits, same coffee. And how come one team was absolutely awesome and a joy to be with? And how come one team was an absolute train crash? So that opened up my curiosity, not in just being the leader, but being curious to learn how to be the best leader. And that led me to coaching skills. And then at the same time, life is busy and there's lots of things to be interested in and curious about. And really, like your wife with three beehives in the garden, well, that's how I started. And that was a hobby, nothing to do with work. I wanted to switch off from work on a Monday night and go to my bee club in rural France where I live. And I thought, great, I've got work, and I've got hobby. And learning about the very complex nature of a beehive and how 75,000 bees in a hive take decisions, how they communicate, how they organize themselves, how they prioritize work. All of a sudden I realized a beehive is a very interesting metaphor for working life today. And here was
Absolutely.
me thinking, great, I've got work, something, work study, and then I've got non-work study. And of course, all these parallels came together. And then fast forward, I've written the book, Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from Inside a Busy Hive. And my company is called Hive Logic. And a last comment, but you both talked about the importance of emotions and emotional intelligence. My business, which is all about team coaching and team performance, is called Hive Logic. It's nothing to do with logic, is it? It's all to do with emotion. So really, my company should be called Hive Emotion, but it doesn't have the same thing. And I was selling to rational scientists and
Right.
chief finance officers and chief strategy officers. And Hive Logic is easier to sell. The truth is, it's all about emotion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know, Relly, you're just dying to get in here and get a word in edgewise. It's going to be a rough show today. I'm telling you, it's going to be
Bring it
Kathy.
on.
It's Queen Bee here is going to be rushing ahead. But I just want to say that, I've worked at Sanofi, and Genentech when I was with Accenture. So I think in my history, and oh my gosh, where have we crossed paths? But the thing that I want to get across to everybody who's listening is, before I hand this over to my wise, I want to say, mentor over here, Relly, is to think about think about the things in life that you love, that you thought you were going to go do as a hobby, and no matter what you do, you loved your work so much that even in your hobby, your work began to apply. Because I was resonating with everything you were saying about my passion for primates. And so I worked with
Mm,
primates
right.
before I became a professional in my industry. And to this day, I can't get away from looking at certain executives, and I go right to the primate models. It's
Yep.
like, you can't get away from it. And I won't go any further because I'll start really, well, I could offend some people who may be listening. So I'm just going to be quiet for a minute.
For a minute. Well, Well, Kat, I know, throughout your life, you have been the queen bee, and that's why I think this is so exciting. And I was thinking about you, with your primate background. And I think for our leaders, and I'm sure Philip, you'll talk about this, having a different perspective. Often we talk about, can you see things with a beginner's mind? And going back to what we said, you stay on automatic or an autopilot, you stay average. You
Yep.
think a little differently. You look at things a little differently. You can be exceptional. And so, Philip, say, like, first of all, I got the book here.
Yeah,
How
me too.
how
Thank
new
you.
is this?
How new is it? It was launched earlier this year.
Okay, good. And
Yeah.
so, how long did it take? And like, and what was it that, because Kathy and I have a book, Emotional Brilliance. How long did it take you? But so what was the start of that? Like, why did you say, gee, I think I'm going to write a book? And is this your first book or have you written other ones?
It's the first book, hopefully the first of others,
Uh-huh.
because it's a fascinating learning process in itself. So I love writing, and I will write more. Um, Having realized the parallels between beekeeping and the business, and first of all, I just want to say it's about stopping being an automatic, which is exactly as you've described. And
Right.
I'm not suggesting we should work like bees. We are not bees. They are a completely different system, and primates are not. All of these things are interesting ways of opening up better quality discussions.
Yes. Yes.
Yet I can well imagine primates could have a fascinating way to say, stop acting on automatic and think a little bit harder about how you are working, interacting.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm doing with the bee topic. It's to provoke interesting thought and discussion.
So how did you get to Alsace? Like how'd that come about? Better bees there? What's going on?
Yeah, Alsace is a beautiful part of France. It's wine country, and it's right on the Swiss border. And I came to Switzerland 25 years ago for a great job at Novartis. And Novartis
Oh,
is another global
Right.
American drug
Right.
company. And I got offered a great job. I'm from the UK. I jumped at the chance to come and work in Switzerland and live just over the border in France. In fact, I can cycle from my house from France into Switzerland to go to work. And that brought me here
bored
25
here. It sounds like a rough life.
That's great. And one of my clients is Novartis, so we're definitely familiar with them. You know, um, Philip, I'm looking at the clock. We still got a couple minutes, so let's go maybe to our next question. Um, so how long have you been a team coach? And maybe just give us that, and then we will go to a quick break because I think, as you said, teams are really challenging. One of the things I also say is teamwork is an unnatural act. I should just do it myself. It's faster, it's easier. Teamwork takes work. So maybe before we go to break, how long have you been a team coach? And then we'll just leave it hanging there. And then because
Right.
we go to our break.
There's a big thought there. Uh, I've been running Hive Logic, which is a boutique team coaching business, for 8 years now. And it took a lifetime to begin to learn about the complexity of the topic.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more to Philip Atkinson about being wise and the leadership lessons. And I know he has three big lessons for us. So don't go away. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Recording.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. We are learning how bees are top performers and how do they do that as a team. We're also going to hear about their lifespan. We're also going to hear about the queen bee. No, Kathy, not you, but the real queen bee in the hives that what can we learn from the queen bee? So we're talking with Phillip Atkinson. He has hive-logic.com. So Philip, welcome back. Tell us a little bit about just the bees themselves. What lessons can we learn? And then we're zeroing in. I know you have 12 lessons in your book, but we're zeroing in on at least three or four.
Great. Well, there's lots of lessons. Let's focus on one, just about the lifespan of the bee and actually their work, their career. Let's talk about a bee career. Can we do that, really?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, let's start with the queen bee. Start with the queen bee there.
All right, let's start. Let's start with the queen bee. Actually, let's just take this is super interesting. 150 years ago, Queen Victoria, she sent scientists and explorers all around the world to describe the world, and they described a beehive. The naturalists, the ecologists described a beehive, and they said Queen Victoria runs an empire from the top, and she's in charge. She's the chief commander, the chief admiral, head of the church. She's in charge at the top. And a beehive is like Victorian society with one queen bee at the top. Now, this was a very popular framework. And for 150 years, people have thought, yeah, that's right, the queen bee is in charge at the top of the hive. Now, that's a bit like a hierarchy command and control model. And for 150 years at work, it's worked very well. We have one boss who knows everything, who knows more than everybody else, and they take all the decisions in a hierarchical command and control. Now, in the past few decades, actually, we've learned the world is more complicated than that, and there are alternative models. So first of all, to the bees, the queen bee does not sit at the top and control everything. The queen actually sits at the bottom and serves the hive. So actually the hive is a single, you can see the hive as a single organism made of 75,000 parts. And the queen is just one of those parts. And she has a very, very important role in laying the eggs and the pheromones, but she serves the hive. She doesn't sit at the top and control them. And that's very subtle and an important distinction. And at work, look, let's look at work today. You do not need to have a single hierarchical command and control where information only goes up and down. You know, I remember when I started work, to get a few $10 for a lunch approved, that the hierarchical up and down approval was crazy. Why do you need to do that stuff? And there are new ways of working. We look at holacracy or sociocracy or agile ways of working or scrums or matrix teams. There's many, many alternative ways of working that are more fit for purpose today. And the chapter all about the queen bee asks some very searching questions about what are the best models to use to design your business. It's fascinating.
Well, that's beautiful. And the one thing that you said that really resonates with me before we go on to some of the other aspects of lessons that we can learn from the hive is, now my number one genetic quality, believe it or not, is generosity. And so I'm only happy as the queen bee when I'm serving other people's needs.
Oh, that's great.
And so I am very touched by what you just said. And I'd like the audience to think about this. When you are at your best in a team, what role are you playing? Mm-hmm. And does it play to your strengths? Right? And we often don't look at ourselves from a team perspective. So I think being a bee in this case is really important.
So Phillip, with that, just some of the data that you have. So tell us how long bees live. And then I heard you say earlier, is it different for the queen bee?
Yeah, so this is a different lesson. This is actually at work, it's about careers. So let's talk about a female worker bee. So when you see a bee on a flower in the garden this time of year, when it's flying, pollinating, at the moment we have apple trees in our garden and beautiful white blossom full of bees. But when you see a bee there, it is in the last 3 days of its life. So wow. A female worker honeybee only flies to pollinate for the last 3 days of its life. And at this time of year, its lifespan is approximately 34 days. Now, for the previous 31 days of its career, it has done 7 different jobs inside the hive. Wow. And this gets super crazy. When the queen will lay 1,000 eggs a day, and these eggs hatch. And when the eggs hatch and when they form perfectly formed larvae and they hatch as adult bees, the first job they are taught is to be a nurse. And they are taught to look after the new larvae and to feed them and to protect them and to keep them safe. And they do that job 100% night and day for 3 to 4 days. It's functional specialization, and they do it really well. Then, and there's like a hidden genetic clock, they stop and they train the bees that have just been hatched to do the same job. So they become mentors and leaders and guides, and they teach the previous bees who've just been born to do that same job. And then they are trained to do the next job, which is completely different skill set. They are trained to be builders. So instead of nursing, they then focus on secreting wax from the back of their legs to make those perfectly hexagonal cells where the queen will lay her eggs. So they go from being a nurse to being a builder. And then from being a builder, they train the previous bees who were nurses to be builders. And then they go all the way through the hive. They go through security, they go through heating, they go through feeding, until they get to the front door of the hive. And they only get to the front door just before they fly, when they receive the bees coming back. And then for the last 3 days, they are taught to fly. Now, if we just pause for a moment, that says lots of things that can provoke interesting discussions about our own working career. We are not like bees. I'm not suggesting we do 7 different jobs, one after the other. What it does mean is the hive has complete agility. So if the hive gets damaged, let's say a bear knocks over the hive, or as I've done, reverse my car over one by mistake, it means every bee in the hive knows how to build, how to be a nurse, how to be security, how to construct, and immediately they can reallocate their resources. So that's a good thing. And they've spent 10 million years evolving to get this right. But if you think about our own careers at work, when I started work, there were linear career paths. I would do one job and then another job, and I might go from sales into marketing, into leadership. Those paths don't really exist anymore. And some of the jobs that we might do next might not exist yet. And when we work with teams, it's about making sure people try something, use their skills, try a job and do it really well. And then mentor people and train people and perhaps speak at conferences, but master a skill and do it really well and spread their knowledge, spread their skills, spread their ability, and then think what else. So if I'd be working in finance, maybe I should try working in customer relations. Or maybe if I've been working in customer relations, maybe I could work in production to understand the customer needs better. And really, we encourage people to keep experimenting, to try, to practice, to dive into something and to evolve so that you are adding more value to your business, more value to your customers, and more value to society. If you try something you don't like it, great, you've learned something. Try something else, but keep learning and keep being curious and keep developing. That's my plea, to learn from the bees.
No, definitely. Let me just ask you a couple questions about bee communication, because Relly was saying that, you know, he and his wife have 3 hives, and the other day, Julie got stung, his wife, on the neck. And you were saying in one of your TEDx talks that the bees communicate in very specific ways. You know when it's going to rain, you know when there's stress, you know when something's going to happen that gives you some mindfulness there about whether you should or should not be interacting with those bees, in addition to them communicating with each other.
Kathy, thank you. Let's call being stung by a bee, let's call that feedback. When it's feedback, it comes swift and it comes stinging. Call that feedback that something has not worked well. And let's be curious about learning what has not worked well. And what I encourage beekeepers to do, first of all, is to use all of their senses to understand what is happening in the system. So on a beautiful blue sky, like Relly's background, on a beautiful summer's day, humans cannot see a storm is around the corner, but the bees can sense it because they can sense the atmospheric pressure change before we know it's coming. And the bees will be stressed, and you can smell if the bees are stressed because they stop making honey and they start making propolis, which is a very bitter protein. It's very bitter bee glue that the bees use to protect the inside of the hive. So before you take the lid off and put your hands in, just smell what you're noticing from the front of the hive. It's mindfulness. The second thing is you can hear if they are stressed or not. They make a lovely bee flat noise if they're happy, and if they're stressed, the noise goes up almost an octave. But just stop and pause and observe and notice and sense what is happening in the system. You can also see if they're stressed by the staccato movement of the bees. But really, Don't just wade in and take the lid off, or else you'll get stung. Now, it's the same at work. I'm not going to suggest that you smell a team, but actually, before you ask for a pay rise, just tune in as to what is currently going on for your boss at that time. Or if you're going to do a major organizational restructuring affecting thousands of people, make sure you tune in to what is happening in the system while you do that. It's using your emotional intelligence to understand better what is happening. Right. You cannot force something mechanically, or else you'll get stung.
So with that, great way to kind of talk about that. And how do they communicate? Because all of this around teamwork, and I'm really taken with, you said they get trained at different levels, meaning that one bee at a different level is training. How do they train, and how's that communication done?
I'll give you one specific communication technique they use. Have you heard about a thing called the waggle dance?
The waggle dance?
Yeah, is that familiar? Let me explain this. If a bee has found, like today, a beautiful source of pollen, let's say an apple tree in full bloom, one bee flies back to the hive, and it does a figure of 8 dance at the entrance to the hive, telling the other bees in what direction it is by the angle to the sun. And then it tells you how far away it is by how vigorously they dance. And then they will be covered in pollen. So how much pollen they are covered in also is part of telling the story. Now, this all actually happens inside the hive in the dark. But it's a consistent message, and then one bee will go and come back and repeat the message, and another bee will repeat the same message. So the message is built up consistently and with energy and with conviction. Now, let's just think about our email inboxes. There might be a big organizational change, and there might be consultants, or people writing, a one big email. But if I'm on the receiving end of that, one message out of hundreds is just not enough. And I need other people to communicate. I need my friends to tell me. I need my colleague to tell me. I need my neighbor to discuss it. You need to work with a whole organic system to make communication effective. Just because it's been emailed does not mean it's been received. And we use this model really to help organizations pay more attention to how they communicate, and not just sending, but what is received and in what context. And it's a fascinating opportunity to discuss good communication.
Oh, absolutely. There's a great book out by a friend of ours, Sonia Lubomirski, on the difference between being loved and feeling loved. And what you just addressed is this human need to communicate, but often it's totally ineffective, because unless we understand the sociogram, right, the social network by which the information is established, made credible, valued, and then absolutely, positively communicated effectively within the group, we're all going to suffer the waggle dance. We could waggle dance our butts off. We can come in covered in pollen, but if we aren't sharing that with the right people at the right time, those nuances, no matter how much they smell, good or bad, are never going to get picked up. So that's really important. The other thing that I just love about this whole bee society is how it's decided what role an individual might have, and then how long they stay in that role. So maybe that's something we can chat a little bit more about. And I guess the focus I'd like for our audience to hear about is, should we be more like bees, or are we just going to stress ourselves out by trying to learn and do too much in a day, in a lifetime, in a career? And so let's think about that. And when we come back, Phillip, I'd love for you to address some of those very, I'll just say, powerful concepts. And in the meantime, don't go away. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. Hopefully, you're getting intrigued, as Kathy and I are, about bees and their unique communication system. And we all have heard busy as a bee. Both Kathy and I constantly are talking about burnout, resilience, agility. So, how does that relate? Should we be busy as a bee?
Thank you, Reddy. The quick answer is no. So this book, Be Wise, it's not about being like bees. It's about learning from them. We are not bees. We're not a beehive. But let's talk about what the bees do. The bees live in summer. The female worker bees live for about 34 days, as it was said, and then they die. They die of exhaustion. They've hardly stopped. They've hardly rested. They've hardly slept. They live for 34 days and die of exhaustion. And they are the very definition of as busy as a bee. Now, let's translate that to work for a moment. You've just acknowledged overwhelm, burnout, burden, presence 24 hours 7. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. And fundamentally, you know, if you speak to someone at the water cooler, you say, how are you? The answer often is, I'm good, I'm busy, I'm going to a conference, I'm busy, I'm doing a presentation, I'm good, I'm busy. And my plea for the world is stop celebrating busyness.
Mm.
Because busyness is not our competitive advantage. We cannot keep being busier and busier. And yes, there are some great tools to be more effective, AI, of course, but let's celebrate better quality thinking instead. And I would love my clients and my colleagues and my friends to say, Philip, I'm good, thanks. I've spent the whole morning trying to solve a customer problem by understanding my customer better. Or I've been out to visit a customer, or I've been thinking about some of our inefficiencies. I want people to have their competitive advantage is better quality thinking, because that is how we are going to make a difference to life and society. It's not doing the same old stuff, but faster or quicker. It's doing different, bigger stuff in a better way. So the first thing is, let's not be as busy as bees. Let's not celebrate busyness. Let's celebrate our competitive advantage, which is better quality thinking.
That's really powerful. And I think one of the beautiful things about a bee's busyness that we can't necessarily measure effectively, although I'm getting something here and I'm trying to get what the underlying current is. The bees create something that's either called honey or propolis. And humans, we either feel good about having been productive or we feel exhausted and burned out by having chased our tail and not gotten anywhere. And so I think there's a balancing act with the human condition in recognizing what is the quality of that competitive advantage that each individual can contribute, and recognizing the beauty of it and the sweetness of it in your daily activity. How's that?
Kathy, I hear you completely. You know, emotional leadership is the big fundamental difference. It's about noticing and listening and reflecting and creating the best possible environment for people to do their best work. And your best work is not the most work. It's not about quantity. It should be about quality.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think leaders today have a responsibility to lead in that style. And maybe it's more of a coaching leadership that is needed to get the best out of brilliant people. Let's support them to do their most brilliant work. Not just the same stuff the previous person did, but quicker.
And one of the things, Philip, that I hear you saying also is that sense of purpose, and to just put the spotlight, a little bit more on purpose, as in your job, what's your purpose? The leader helps connect purpose. What you're doing is meaningful versus here's the task, you move this here, you wrote this report in purpose. And Kathy, this is for you and our friend Ed Nottingham, the book Born to Flourish by Richard Davidson, now out of research comes up with 4 key insights, which really relates to what you're saying, Philip, in this research-based awareness. Are you aware of what's kind of going around like the bees? Are you connected? The communication back and forth with the bees connected. And do you have insight? Is this role working for me? What can I learn? How fast am I learning? But then I think to elevate and put the spotlight on, and maybe Philip, you can speak to this, is purpose. And I think sometimes our purpose gets dampened or we lose that sense of purpose. And especially as we get up in age, that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So do you want to say a little bit about that? I mean, how that ties in, and then maybe we'll do the segue because the other topic was decision making that we can learn from this.
And chapter 12 in the book, the final segment, is all about aligning with our life's purpose, and that's hard. It's hard to do, and it's when you're younger, you might not have tuned into, you're experimenting and playing and what you like and what you don't like. What is so important is, you mentioned awareness. It's your own insight. It's your own self-awareness about what's working for you, what's working, what fits, what you're passionate about, where your energy is, all the opposite, where your energy gets taken away, what you're not interested in. And people often, if they're too busy, you don't get time to tune into that. So it takes emotional maturity to be aware of what's working well for you and what's working well for the organization and what else might you need. It takes emotional maturity and time to do that. And then actually it takes courage to speak up and take an action about that. So a lot of the work we also do is around psychological safety.
Right.
It might be an overused word, but actually people in life, not just in a meeting, but people need to be able to notice what is happening and then to speak up about it or to act.
Yeah, no, it's funny. This idea of being a first-class noticer, which was written about many, many years ago by one of my mentors, Warren Bennis, in a book called Organizing Genius. And it's very apropos that we're talking about being a noticer, right? And there's a difference between being an observer and being a noticer. So in the animal behavior world, you're doing observations, and during your observations, there are things that you notice that take additional, if you will, focus, so that you can identify more of what's going on at a deeper level. So observing something is great, but noticing it and taking the effort needed to focus on it and then bring it to people's attention and awareness is a true gift that we have to really think about. And then, really, to your point, what are the decisions a leader is making about what to notice and what to bring to our attention in a team? Because I'll tell you, I grew up in a time of corporate America as a consultant in, big six consulting firms working across the globe, where we were being challenged to make teams more effective by pulling out the weakest link. And we were actually rewarded for putting people on the carpet and saying, hey, your team members aren't real happy with you today. And here's why. And what do you want to do about it so that we all get better? But to the point you just made, Philip, about the importance of psychological safety and well-being, we avoid conflict and confrontation like the plague. So are we all sitting around in our beehive trying to avoid the sting of feedback? Or are we able to, through our good communication and noticing what's working versus what's not working, able to sweetly move that bee that wants to sting us to the team member that wants to collaborate with us and create that honey?
And it amazes me that this stuff hasn't been taught in previous years. The skills of as you said, first class noticing, the skills of articulating what we're feeling, the skill of creating a safe environment. These are all the big factors to help organizations succeed. And we've not spent enough time until now focusing on these very, very important skills. They used to be called soft skills, as though it was kind of an additional nice to have. No, they are fundamentally important skills that every leader needs. And that's a lot of the work we do at Hive Logic with teams around the world. We increase performance by increasing awareness and action and speaking up and speaking out. It's hard work. To do this work is hard and it needs doing. And until now, a lot of it has been avoided and we've seen problems because of it.
So before we get to the end here, let's talk a little bit about decision making, because we talk about emotions drive decisions. If you're not aware of your emotions, you most likely will get another big buzzword, get hijacked. And so one of the things that I talk about that leaders don't like to hear is, if you're not aware of your emotions, you're hijacked, you're operating with less IQ points. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's kind of a graphic way. it's thinking, thinking. You're dumber now. So tell us a little bit about the decision making in your book.
I mean, the first thing, really, thank you, is emotions are everywhere. Good emotions, bad emotions. We don't even need to label them. Just look an extreme spectrum of emotions, and they exist, and they drive our behavior. So at work, let's notice those emotions, and let's not punish them or be judgmental. Let's notice what's happening in the organization. That's good human leadership. And then, in terms of decision making, we take lots of decisions at work, and not all decisions are the same. And we need to have different models of decision making for different types of decisions. With some models, of course, we can have consensus, or we can delegate individuals to take decisions or make recommendations. But some bigger decisions, we need a whole process of fact finding and agreement and consensus and disagreement. And that's when the bees take a decision to move to a new home, which is called a swarm, and that happens in May. So tell your wife ready to pay attention. They have a very complicated process that's taken 10 million years to evolve, where they actually seek second opinions. So a scout bee will go and find a new place, and then another bee will take a second opinion, and then a third bee, and they gather data, and they disagree, and they disagree, and they disagree until there is enough consensus, and then every single bee supports one decision. It's a fascinating process.
Wow.
Read more in chapter 10 about this, but organizations need to get better at decision making and acknowledging different processes are required for different types of decisions.
Well, just the consensus piece, and then maybe we'll end with this. You talked about bees living 34 days. How long does the queen bee live?
The queen lives about 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
So it's a different pace, it's a different process to the other bees, but it all rolls together to be a whole functioning organic system.
Well, if you want to learn more about how to be better at everything you do, go to hive-logic.com and look for Phillip Atkinson and also his new book, which I'm so delighted that you were able to send to us. And that was very generous of you, Phillip, called Be Wise, 12 Leadership Lessons from a Busy Beehive. And Relly, I'll give you the final word here for today's show. And Phillip, it's been an absolute pleasure. I cannot wait to listen to more of your work online.
Well, thank you, Philip. I agree. And let's do the good work that we got to do. It doesn't mean busy, 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 but that we do the good work. So thank you very much, folks. Continue to